Adopted. Accordingly, under the rule, the committee rises. Speaker, the committee of the whole House and the State of the Union has under consideration H.R. 2838, pursuant to the House Resolution 455, order to go back to the House for amendment adopted in the committee of the whole. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House and the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 2838 and pursuant to House Resolution 455 reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded by any amendment to the amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the question is on adoption of the amendment in the nature of the substitute, as amended. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to authorize appropriations for the Coast Guard for fiscal years 2012 through 2015 and for other purposes.
The House will come to order. The House will come to order. If members will please clear the well of the House. If members will please take their conversations from the floor. The House will come to order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
Mr. Speaker, I'm opposed to the bill in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Larson of Washington moves to recommit the bill H.R. 2838 to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. At the end of the bill, add the following. Title 8. Prohibition on contractor fraud, waste, and abuse. Section 801, Prohibition on contractor fraud, waste, and abuse. A, Prohibition. The Secretary of the Department in which the Coast Guard is operating and the Secretary of the Army, acting through the Chief of Engineers, are each prohibited from awarding a contract or issuing a delivery order or task order to a person that the Secretary finds has been convicted of 1. Fraud or a criminal offense in connection with obtaining, attempting to obtain, or performing a contract or subcontract with the federal government, or 2, embezzlement, theft, forgery, bribery, falsification, or destruction of records, making false statements, tax evasion, violating federal criminal tax laws, or receiving stolen property. B, period of...
And the amendment be considered as read.
Without objection.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
I reserve a point of order.
Point of order is reserved. House will be in order. The gentleman deserves to be heard. Gentleman may proceed. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this final amendment prohibits the U.S. Coast Guard and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers from awarding contracts to felons convicted of contract fraud, waste, and abuse. It was just 1 month ago, Mr. Speaker, that a federal magistrate judge indicted 4 individuals on an alleged bribery and kickback scheme regarding the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers contracts that defrauded U.S. taxpayers of a minimum of $20 billion. Taxpayer dollars wasted on BMWs, Rolexes, flat-screen televisions, first-class airline tickets, investment properties across the globe, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. Gentleman deserves to be heard. If members will please take their conversations from the floor. Gentleman may proceed.
In exchange for these kickbacks, the contractors were guaranteed millions in sole-source, open-ended contracts with a total award potential of more than $1.7 billion. That's billion with a B. They were sailing high on taxpayer dollars while other Americans were struggling to stay afloat. When they were arrested, the co-conspirators had their sights set on a $780 million Corps of Engineer contract. Fortunately, they were apprehended before this very large contract was awarded. Similarly, in August of this year, a federal court grand jury in Norfolk, Virginia, indicted 4 co-conspirators of multiple alleged criminal charges, including conspiracy, theft of public money, wire fraud, illegal gratuities, false statements, and money laundering in connection with a kickback scheme involving Coast Guard vessel repair contracts. Mr. Speaker, this August 2011 kickback scheme is particularly striking because of the Coast Guard's spectacular contract failures in recent history under the Deepwater program. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman may proceed.
We all may recall that under Deepwater, the Coast Guard's most infamous failure was the effort to lengthen the Coast Guard's existing 110-foot patrol boats to 123 feet and install new, upgraded information technology equipment. After 8 boats were delivered, the Coast Guard determined that the lengthened hulls cracked and were unsafe. We simply cannot afford to allow $1 more of our limited federal resources, of the taxpayers' limited federal resources, to be wasted. We can help root out these crony kickbacks with this final and straightforward amendment. This is a plain and simple vote to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. When you hear about contractors who engage in the largest corruption scheme in modern history, like those in the Army Corps, it's clear they need to be put in the penalty box. This final amendment simply says contractors who rip off taxpayers can't get more contracts. Specifically, it prohibits the Coast Guard and the Corps of Engineers from awarding a contract to a contractor convicted of a fraud or a criminal offense related to obtaining a contract or subcontract with the federal government. It also prohibits a contract for a contractor convicted of embezzlement, theft, forgery, bribery, falsification of records, making false statements, tax evasion, violating federal criminal tax laws, or receiving stolen property from participating. The final amendment ensures that felons convicted of criminal offenses related to receiving government contracts and abusing the public trust will no longer stand to benefit from future federal contracts for at least 10 years. This amendment will not kill the bill. It will simply immediately add this taxpayer safeguard, and then the House will vote on final passage of the bill right here and right now. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in supporting this final amendment, which will ensure that we bust waste, fraud, and abuse and throw these kickback cronies into the penalty box. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise?
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the point of order and claim time in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes. Gentleman deserves to be heard. Members, please take their conversations from the floor. Gentleman may proceed. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, we've had a very bipartisan effort in coming to this point on this Coast Guard legislation in our subcommittee and our full committee, and I must say I'm disappointed that with all the cooperation and back and forth that we've had, this is an issue that's never been raised. But notwithstanding that, bribery and kickbacks are illegal under any circumstances. This is redundant. It's already illegal to do these things. I urge everyone to vote no on the motion to recommit and yes on final passage, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. No. The noes have it.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays. I request a recorded vote.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by an electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote on the motion to recommit. Will be followed by 5-minute votes on the passage of H.R. 2838 if ordered and adoption of House Resolution 463. This is a 15-minute vote.
This is the Democratic motion to recommit on the Coast Guard reauthorization bill, a motion proposed by Democrat Rick Larson of Washington. 15-minute vote, final passage on the Coast Guard bill coming up. Also a vote on the rule for a bill that the House will take up and debate tomorrow, the bill allowing gun owners with proper permits to carry firearms across state lines. So that vote will be the last in this series of recorded votes. 15-minute vote on the House floor. In our Road to the White House coverage, Rick Perry yesterday, Republican presidential candidate, in in Iowa at the Bettendorf Center for the Reagan dinner last night, said that if he were elected, he would, quote, uproot all three branches of government and overhaul Washington. That would include eliminating federal agencies, setting term limits for federal judges, and pushing for a part-time Congress. He made those comments again at the Reagan dinner in the Quad Cities Waterfront Convention Center. I want to show that to you during this vote. It's 20 minutes, and we'll show you as much of it as we can while the vote continues.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. Judy, thank you. It is an honor to be here with you. The hardest working woman in show business. So I got to say, you're awesome. I really appreciate that. And Susan Fraser's out there somewhere. Susan, where are you? There you are. Thank you, girl. She's my Scott County coordinator here, and she's just doing a fabulous job. So thank you for all that you're doing. And Matt, obviously, just getting to watch you and stand up for Iowa, and it is awesome. I mean, I told somebody that they said, "Man, what's that Secretary of State, man? He's just all over this first in the country." And I said, "Man, it's kind of like if you ain't for your home team, who you going to be for?" So Matt, thank you for the work that you've done, and I know the people of Iowa are very proud to have you and the work that you do. And to the local senators and the representatives, thank you all for coming out and for your public service, your sacrifice that you make, and certainly these three individuals who got up and shared with you their hearts about the future of this country, the individuals that want to represent you in Congress, and they truly, they get it about what this is really all about from the standpoint of nibbling around the edges is not going to work anymore. We're going to have to send people to Washington that truly are going to make a difference. And I can see all three of those ready to walk into the room with maybe a sledgehammer and get a little bit of work done. So anyway, honored to have them up here. And, you know, being here, I'm always reminded when I show up in Iowa, you know, the pundits always think they're the ones that pick presidents. Nope. It's the people of Iowa that pick the presidents. I got that figured out. And I feel a special connection, as Brian was sharing with you, being the son of a couple of tenant farmers from back out in Paint Creek, Texas. And actually, Sandy, it wasn't a town. Matter of fact, it was just a little community out there. And small school on a farm-to-market road, had about 110 kids, grades 1 through 12, and a Methodist church and a Baptist church across the farm-to-market road, your choice. And as I was growing up, there basically, Judy, there were three things that I could be doing: going to school, which took up a good bit of time, or working at the farm and, you know, being in the 4-H and showing club calves and what have you, or going to Boy Scouts. And Mom made sure that I never missed a revival. So but our teachers there at that little school, they lived around they lived around the campus, Doc. They were had their own. I mean, it was just an incredible little community and a place to grow up, and it was pretty humble beginnings, and I will be forever grateful for that. We weren't rich. As a matter of fact, people would probably say we didn't have much materially, but we were rich. We were rich in things of faith and family. We were rich with great neighbors who took care of each other. I learned, unlike in a lot of Western societies, that opportunity wasn't granted to you because of your family name, but because of your capacity to dream, your willingness to work hard. You know, as Americans, we do not believe government exists to punish success in order to spread the wealth. We don't believe that. We believe government exists to protect our rights and to guarantee our freedom. I think Washington today has it all wrong. They punish success instead of multiplying it, Brad. They think the public sector can stimulate the economy when That's the job of the private sector. They think the answer is to every problem, let's just add a new agency of government. And I can remember most of them. And I, for one, don't believe the people that got us into this mess can get us out of it. Senator Jim DeMint in South Carolina, I heard him say the other day, he said, "Are you better off today than you were $4 trillion ago?" The solution is not to nominate someone who's going to nibble around the edges, as I said earlier. We're going to have people like these congressmen that walked in here tonight talking about bold ideas, about really making a difference. Washington doesn't need a new coat of paint. It needs a complete overhaul. You know, it's really interesting as I look across the country and as I've traveled a good bit since the middle of August, America remains mired in the ruins of this Washington out-of-touch, big government economic policies. And when you go into Washington, D.C., though, and that surrounding area, they're doing just fine. It's really interesting. The fact, Washington metro area is now the most affluent metropolitan area in the country. And that's because all of those lobbyists, that's because all of those overpaid czars and bureaucrats haven't suffered one bit while we've been going through one of the worst economies that this country has ever seen. Main Street's windows may be getting boarded up, but the cash continues to flow to those Wall Street financiers, those beltway profiteers. Now, tomorrow I'm going to unveil a plan to uproot all three branches of government and overhaul Washington. It touches every branch of government because they each have contributed to the demise of America. I'm going to address lifetime federal judges who arrogantly rewrite our laws from the bench. I'm going to address the permanent bureaucracy of the executive branch, which thwarts the will of the American people to advance a big government agenda. I'm going to put forward some very dramatic reforms for a Congress that not only spends too much, but is in Washington too much. The question facing Iowans in 50 days isn't whether to embrace change, but to decide for them, Iowans, to decide who is the most credible messenger of that change. Now, I'm the first to admit I'm not the most polished candidate out there. But let me tell you one thing, I stick to my principles. And those principles include a flat tax so simple you can file your income tax on a postcard. Right there. I'm betting even Timothy Geithner can fill this out and get it out on time. Those principles include creating a level playing field. That's why I'm for closing the corporate loopholes and carve-outs that these lobbyists and these tax lawyers have been exploiting to feed at that Washington trough. I'm the only candidate who has a plan to balance our budget by the year 2020. And with our nation, just as you heard John say a while ago, approaching $15 trillion in debt, I think any discussion of funding for foreign aid should start with the number 0. We will not fund nations who oppose our interests and harm our soldiers. That's just a fact. When it comes to protecting life, I offer more than just some pro-life rhetoric. I got a pro-life record. I signed a parental consent law for minors seeking an abortion. I signed a budget that defunds Planned Parenthood in Texas. And rather than bowing to the political correctness of the liberal elites, I led the charge in Texas to change, or I should say to define, marriage as a sacred institution between one man and one woman. And we put it on the constitutional amendment and put it in the Texas Constitution. And I might add, Matt, just this last session, I was proud to sign that legislation that in our state, when you go to vote, you must come with a photo ID. Keep at it. You're on the right track, brother. Listen, leadership isn't about style. It's about substance. It's about action. And the test of any American is not whether or not we get knocked down. We're all going to do that. Every one of us have. But it's whether we get up. Throughout the years, Americans have been defined by men and women who got off the mat and fought for their values. It started with the Pilgrims. They wouldn't accept religious persecution in their hometown, their homeland, so they sailed here to find new life and new freedom. And then it continued with the colonists. They bristled at the taxes and the edicts of a distant crown. And they never stopped fighting until they won that battle. Generations of Americans have not shrunk from a worthy fight. In the 20th century, Americans have fought the forces of fascism in 2 world wars, the forces of communism in Korea and in Vietnam in the Cold War. And since then, our troops have fought dictators who threaten our vital interest in the Middle East and Asia. Right now, there are millions of Americans on the mat, not because of a foreign power, but because of flawed federal policies. Too many know the shame of going home to tell a loved one that they lost their job today. Too many have to tell their children they can't afford to go to college. Millions have lost their homes because the federal government and credit rating agencies misled them into thinking that they could afford zero down. Who is it that's going to fight for those people? Who is it that's going to stand up for those Americans? Not an administration that has made our economy crisis even worse. Not a president who in the last few days has called our people soft, lacking in ambition and imagination were his words. Who just Saturday night said Americans have gotten lazy. Mr. President, Americans aren't lazy and they're not soft. Americans do not lack a vision or ambition. We lack leadership in Washington, D.C. That's what this country lacks. The American people are not to blame for this bloated federal government that's out of touch with American interests. And for every American who's been knocked down by Washington's mismanagement, here's my pledge. I'm going to fight to end the IRS as you know it today. I'm going to fight to overhaul Washington, build a smaller, more humble federal government. Fight to create jobs for every American that's out of work and won't rest until those who are looking for work have found it and they can have their dreams again. We've had enough of leaders who point the finger and say theirs were to blame. I want to point this country in a new direction. I'm in this race for the presidency not because of some lifelong ambition, but because the American people are yearning for a leader who will tell them the truth, who will put forward bold and visionary plans, who will not appease the Washington establishment, but dismantle it. If you want real change, if you want to overhaul business as usual, I ask you for your support. I ask you to caucus for me on January the 3rd. Let's get America working again, and let's get this movement started right here in Iowa. God bless you. Thank you all for coming out and being with us tonight.
Governor, don't forget to file your taxes. Yes.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Give another round of applause for Governor Perry. Terrific speech. I'm excited tonight like I was when we did this first time a few years back, because you could see the energy and excitement within the Republican Party that indicated that we had a good wind at our back and we were ready to win. We're ready to win in 2012. Let's continue the hard work. Let's continue to be united and committed. Go to your caucus, but come behind whoever wins that process, and let's go and have a great Republican victory in 2012. Thank you for coming. God bless you. I have to remind you that the silent auction will remain open for 10 more minutes, so check your bids one last time, and then when the auction's over, take your bid sheet but not the item to the front desk, and they will check you out, and then you can pick up the item. Thanks again.
On this vote, the yeas are 189, the nays are 235. The motion is not adopted. Question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Finished business is the vote on the adoption of the House Resolution 463, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Calendar Number 90, House Resolution 463, Resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 822 to amend Title 18 United States Code to provide a national standard in accordance with which non-residents of a state may carry concealed firearms in the state.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
Well, in that quick maneuver a moment ago, the House voiced approval. They approved the Coast Guard authorization bill, the Programs and Policies bill, approved by a voice vote. So they move on to the final vote in this series, and this is expected to be the last recorded vote of the day. This is a vote on the rule for a bill that the House will take up tomorrow. That bill would allow gun owners with proper permits to carry firearms across state lines. The rule would allow for an hour of general debate and the consideration of 10 amendments. But again, the House is going to take up that bill tomorrow, not expected this afternoon. Meanwhile, the Senate will be gaveling back in about 15 minutes or so, and they will pick up debate on 2012 spending, another minibus, this one dealing with just under $130 billion in proposed spending for energy and water projects, financial services, and State Department and foreign operations. This after the first so-called minibus has been approved by a House-Senate conference. That was approved yesterday in conference committee. That package includes spending for agriculture, commerce, justice, and science, and transportation and HUD. The CQ, Congressional Quarterly, writes this afternoon that with work in the conference done, the two chambers are expected to adopt it this week, sending the President the first full-year spending measures for the fiscal year that began on October 1st. You can follow Senate coverage and their continued debate on 2012 spending when they come back in at 3 p.m. Eastern. Also today, the leaders of the House and Senate, John Boehner and Harry Reid, have met. He's talking about the so-called super committee, the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee. The Hill writing that leadership aides in the House and Senate say the meeting doesn't signal that Reid and Boehner are moving to take over the floundering negotiations. They say that a bigger role for Reid and Boehner in the talks seems the next logical step. However, as the supercommittee members acknowledge that they are at an impasse with only 8 days until the November 23rd deadline.
Let's vote. The yeas are 271. The nays are 153. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will come to order. If members will please clear the well. If members will take their conversations from the floor. If members would kindly take their conversations from the well of the floor. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Aside from having one of the best academic programs in Minnesota, the Eden Prairie School District is now home to new state champions in 2 sports, boys soccer and girls volleyball. And despite going up against an undefeated team, the Eden Prairie boys soccer team struck early, scoring their first goal in their game in the 4th minute of the 2A championship. The Eden Prairie Eagles kept up the pressure and they outshot the opposition and won the game 3-1 while capturing their 2nd state championship since 2002. And then this past weekend, in what the Minneapolis Star-Tribune deemed epic, the Eden Prairie girls volleyball team won the 3A state championship throughout 5 sets by battling 32 tie scores, 14 lead changes, until Eden Prairie took the final set 22-20 to win the first state championship ever. So congratulations to these fantastic student athletes at Eden Prairie High School, and also to the coaches, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does this gentleman from Georgia rise? Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I think there's 3 things that we need to do in America in order to increase jobs and economic growth. Number 1, we've got to drill our own oil. You know, if you drive a car or you use goods and services that came to you by a vehicle using an internal combustion engine, somebody had to drill for that gas. Now, do you really believe that Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Libya are more environmentally sensitive than we are? Of course not. We can do it in an environmentally sensitive way and become oil independent. Secondly, we need to have tax simplification. I'm outraged when I hear about people not paying their fair share of taxes. We need to have a tax code that is a ½ an inch deep and miles wide so that everybody is paying their fair share. And then thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we need to change the regulatory environment. Regulators don't need to approach businesses with an I gotcha, I'm against you attitude, but more of a partnership. Hey, we want to work with you on worker safety and environmental protection and product liability laws, things like this, so that we can work for business and nurture responsible corporate citizenship. And I think we can do that, and that will increase our jobs and our economic growth. And I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. 1 minute requests. For 1 minute requests. The chair is prepared to recognize for the first 1 hour special order. Special order is that. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. We're going to spend the next hour talking about what's on the minds of most every American. Jobs. How do we get a job? What's it going to take to finally go back to work? There's a lot of pain out there and there's a lot of suffering, and people really wonder what this Congress is going to do to help alleviate this crisis of unemployment. I want to just share a couple of stories and then ask my colleague from New York to join me, Mr. Tonko. I was at a meeting that was set up in Berkeley, California at the Berkeley Lawrence Laboratories, one of the premier laboratories in the United States. And the director of the lab was talking about technology transfer, that is research, the product of that research coming out of the laboratories and then
jobs being created from that and new businesses, the entrepreneurial spirit. As he went through his story, I suddenly was so upset, not by the research, not by the technology transfer, but rather by the fact that his final statement was, and this company is moving to China to manufacture the product of this research. And I thought to myself, how can that be? That the investment of the American people in the research, the education of the engineers and scientists, and then this research coming out of the laboratory, and all of the development work, and finally, we find that the whole thing winds up in China. So what we want to talk about today, at least in part, is this: making it in America. What are the governmental policies that will once again create a situation where we will be making it in America, and the director of the laboratory won't be telling me at a meeting that, gee, this great idea is moving offshore so that the manufacturing will take place in China? The reason he said that the manufacturing was going overseas is that there was no capital formation, no capital available. So I'm going to spend just a few moments on this before I turn it over to my colleagues. Here's what's important. This is where innovation is, and this is where innovation fits into our economy. If you take a look over the last decade, the enormous growth in the sales of the innovation companies. It's grown from about, 1.5 to 3.1.
The House is in order. Please remove your conversations from the House floor. Gentleman may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. 1.5 to 3.1 trillion dollars, and all of this in the innovation economy. So this is exceedingly important in the job growth of this country. Another thing to keep in mind is this: the innovative companies create the jobs and they grow quickly. Just looking at the total GDP, the innovation companies that I showed in the previous, the total volume, it's over 21% of the American GDP is in these innovation companies. So why is it? Why is it that this new company can't find the capital to build a manufacturing facility in the United States? Well, one of the reasons is Wall Street and all the games that are going on in Wall Street, but there's also another one, and this is particularly important to California, and that is this. It's called venture capital and IPOs, the initial public offerings. If you take a look at this, you'll notice that a decade ago, we had a lot of public offerings. And over the last several years, we've seen a decline in the public offerings. What the public offerings do is to free up capital by going out to the public, offering stock. That money then comes back to the venture capital firms, and this whole process goes round and round and over again, creating jobs and innovation. This is something we're going to have to address, and legislation is going to be introduced in the weeks ahead to address this part of making it in America. So with that, as an introduction to one piece of this larger picture of making it in America, I'd like to turn to Mr. John Lawrence of the great state of Connecticut, who is our caucus leader.
I thank the gentleman.
Did I say Lawrence? I meant Larson, didn't I?
I thank the gentleman from California. I thank him for his leadership on this issue, and as he has repeatedly taken to this floor and talking about what I think is thematically something that America is in tune with, and that's the understanding and the commitment that we need to return to manufacturing, we need to return to our industrial base, we need to enhance our innovative skills, we need to make things here in America. So Make It in America has become our agenda. Over the last several weeks, there have been more than 1,000+ town forums and hearings where people have discussed the concept of creating jobs and making things here in America. We all know that for every manufacturing job, that creates 4 other service sector jobs. And this is vitally important. I visited a company with their president, Bing Murphy. The company's called the Industrial Airflow Dynamics. IAFD is a manufacturer in the state of Connecticut. They make everything in America. They compete with foreign companies. They're going begging to make sure that they get more skilled workers lined up to do something that is extraordinarily unique in manufacturing. And a recent study and survey in the state of Connecticut indicated that in the state alone, 2,500 manufacturing jobs going unfilled because of lack of skills or appropriate training, and the need oftentimes for the small entrepreneur and manufacturer who doesn't have a huge human resources department to sort through applicants and to make sure that there's this opportunity for them to do that. Well, we're hoping to pilot and lead the way in making sure that we're matching skills with manufacturers as we continue to focus on making things here in America. We all know, as the gentleman from California has pointed out, that when you make it in America, every American can make it. I want to say this as well, and I thank the gentleman so much for his leadership on this floor. We have an opportunity that is quickly going to disappear, and that is the super committee. We have taken the position within the Democratic caucus. There's a very simple equation, that job creation equals deficit reduction. Let me say that again. Job creation equals deficit reduction. We know from CBO scoring that just getting unemployment, which is at an unacceptable level of more than 14 million Americans plus, and 25 million Americans that are underemployed, that if we get the figure of 9.1 unemployment to below 7%, we cut the deficit by a third. There is no other silver bullet. There is no other item before us that brings that extraordinary relief that I know people on both sides of the aisle desire. This super committee, by embracing jobs, has an opportunity, unprecedented opportunity, without a cloture vote that is used to block and has been in the Senate over 497 bills that we've passed, or without poison pill amendments in the House to allow an up or down vote on job creation, the President's proposals, the proposals that have been put forward by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And while we may disagree in terms of our approach and method, we all agree about jobs, and so why not embrace this opportunity to create jobs? If this should fail, it will fail because we didn't embrace job creation. We didn't embrace the concept of making things here in America. We didn't do what Bing Murphy has been doing back in Connecticut and other manufacturers, focusing on and refusing to do anything other than the patriotic thing, which is to invest in your people, invest in the commitment to America, invest in our manufacturing base so that we can put this country back to work, grow the economy, and lower the deficit at the same time. Americans simply want one thing. As they sit across their dinner tables this evening and have these discussions with their spouses, all they want is the simple dignity that comes from a job. We have an agenda. We have an opportunity. Let's not spoil this chance. Let's take advantage of this opportunity that we have before us to unite the country, put them back to work by making things here in America. I commend the gentleman for his ongoing work, and I commend our colleagues that have come to the floor here this evening to express this deep and abiding concern about jobs, deficit reduction, putting this country back to work, embracing innovation, embracing education, and investing in Americans so that we can succeed. Thank you so much. I commend the gentleman from California.
Mr. Larson, thank you so very much, and you speak well of Connecticut, and you speak well for Connecticut. Thank you very much for that. Well, I guess we're going to do our East-West show here. I would just point out before we go there that America has lost about 40% of its manufacturing jobs in the last 20 years. We can rebuild it. Most of the economic indicators are that America can be competitive in manufacturing. We need to have a level playing field, so China currency is an issue. Mr. Tonko, you've been involved in this innovation economy for a long time. As I recall, you ran the state of New York's innovation efforts before you became a member of Congress. So please share with us today your thoughts, and we'll begin once again the East-West show.
There you go. Thank you, Representative Garamendi, and thank you for bringing us together for some very thoughtful dialogue about the highest priority that is held by Americans from coast to coast, and that is job creation, job retention. Make no mistake about it, no other higher priority. I agree with the previous statements made by the gentleman from Connecticut. Representative Larson spoke of the absolute simplistic equation of job creation and retention equals deficit reduction. It doesn't get plainer, simpler, or more sound than that. It is about creating jobs, reducing the deficit. The job growth will move forward in resolving several of our major issues out there. You know, your focus, Representative Garamendi, on the initial public offerings, the IPOs as they're referenced, they have dropped precipitously. And knowing that that then is a downward spiral that doesn't find the sort of investing that is absolutely essential is a very troubling notion. You know, many will talk about just leaving it to the capitalist model. Let it just work on its own. Well, it's obvious that we need to prime the pump in many areas. You know, you talked about my role in the state of New York. When I served as the head of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, we found that investing from the public sector sources leveraged tremendous amounts of private sector capital. We see it in this global race. This global race on clean energy and innovation is driven by a robust competition. And what we find are the counterparts, the competitors to our American industries, are helped along the way with a co-investing, if you will, that comes from their native country. There are those economies out there that are co-investing with their private sector. And here we're asked to cut dollars for research and development, cut dollars for partnerships, cut dollars for incentives that will inspire that sort of robust quality that is essential if Americans are going to compete and compete effectively well. And so our trends are out there. They're well documented. We saw that we ignored manufacturing as a sector of the economy. We ignored agriculture, and we focused primarily on service sector, and then very narrowly within that service sector with the financial sector. And we know what happened. We turned our back, let the watchdog leave the cage, and allow for freestyle to go amok. And what happened? Across this country, people who had invested all their life savings into the trusted hands of portfolio activity were found without any sort of return. And then America's economy was brought to its knees. That is not the kind of outcome we want here. And so we've said, hey, let's go forward. And we've witnessed now the growth of some 2.8 million private sector jobs. That's after a trend with the Bush recession of 8.2 million jobs lost. Just this past election day, I think you can see some trends out there that are finding the public swing to the Democratic message because they know it's about job creation and job retention, and they know it's about investing in the tools and the toolkit that get us those jobs. We're in an ideas economy, and we need to invest in those ideas, build the prototype, allow it to move to a manufacturing sector, and be robust in our attempts. Make it in America is the mantra to which we have brought the conference, the Democratic conference of this House. We are talking in straightforward language about revitalizing America's manufacturing sector. And we can do it and we can compete keenly if we do it smarter. We don't necessarily have to do it cheaper. You do it smarter. I've talked in my tours with manufacturing throughout the 21st Congressional District in the capital region of New York State. I have talked with a number of manufacturers. We've done tours. We've visited and heard front front and center, from the squad that's the leadership squad. There are thousands of jobs in this country from coast to coast for which skill sets have to be developed. If we move to an automated phase of manufacturing, there are qualities there, there are skills, there are, you know, the academics, the analytical skill sets that are required in order for us to move forward aggressively. Now, there's a sophistication in our society, a sophistication that finds us creating product lines not yet on the radar screen. People will suggest, they'll lament that the glory days of manufacturing have passed us by. No, we need to move forward aggressively, proactively, in creating the agenda that will develop the products of the future. And if someone is to suggest that every idea out there, every concept of a product has been conceived, designed, engineered, manufactured, produced, we're kidding ourselves. And so this is an investment in the future. This is a visionary attempt to pull us along into an area that was ignored, and ignored, that found that ignoring of the manufacturing sector found us falling into the woes of a recession. And so it's time now for us to do it smart, to do it in a way that invests in our manufacturing base, celebrates the empowerment that small business brings to the fabric of our economy. Small business, that economic engine that provides the jump start to our economy, they need the assistance, and that has been our effort here. Talk about revitalizing manufacturing, supporting small business, moving forward with education, higher education, research and development to move the ideas economy along. That's America at her best. That's her pioneer spirit. Let's continue to move in that direction. And again, thank you for bringing this dialogue to the floor.